Hi guys, in this video we talk to EBEN Bolter BSc. What a cool guy. EBEN is the director of photography on Avenue 5, the Netflix smash hit Night Teeth, as well as the upcoming HBO's The Last of Us. We start the conversation asking EBEN how he got involved in filmmaking.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I had a very untraditional route in actually. God, life story. I'm gonna have to. Well, how did I do it? I I was always a film nerd. I just loved movies. I had Star Wars posters on the wall, just like you. And I knew I wanted to do something to do with film, but sort of the art of making films, of cinematography, of directing, that always felt unattainable to me. That always felt like I held, Spielberg, these people in such sort of godlike regard. I never really considered that I could do that. It just seemed impossible, right? So I actually went down the route of, well, maybe I should be a producer. Maybe I could sort of deal with the money and the business side of things, or maybe I could get into distribution. Maybe I could own a cinema one day. I always knew I wanted to have cinema in my life in some way, but I guess I just never considered the filmmaking side of things. And then so this is all to say, I actually studied business studies at university. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So when I was like 22, 23, I was studying business studies and marketing and going down this complete tangent. And I always knew I wanted to find a way to kind of incorporate the business stuff I was learning into the film industry. But I didn't dream in a million years of cinematography. At the same time to that, I was always like a very big sort of technology person, and I got into still photography and I got into taking pictures. And in my mind, those were two completely separate things. I love to take pictures, I love to travel, and I loved cinema, but they were like completely separate, which is really so kind of stupid in retrospect. I just completely had no correlation there. And then the thing that changed for me was it was about 2010, about 11 years ago, when Canon released the 5D update. That it was the 5D Mark II. When they had the first day that you could shoot video on the 5D Mark II, I had a 5D Mark II, and I happened to be living in Japan at the time. This is a whole side story, but I was living in Japan at the time doing some sort of sales job. And it was like, wow, I can shoot video. So I just started to shoot video, just in the same way that I shot sort of documentary style photography. I'd just go out and shoot Japan. And Japan's beautiful, And as soon as you've got a 5D Mark II, essentially large format, and you're shooting Japan, it looks good, So I was kind of like, wait, this looks quite good. And I feel like I kind of know what I'm doing, just sort of inherently, just through like loving films. I kind of sort of understood shot making and understood a part of that. And just started to put the pieces together that, oh yeah, there's a cinematographer on a set and they're basically a photographer and they work with it. And I kind of was like, why have I never thought of that as a career? It was like this really sort of dumb revelation. Then what happened then? Then I moved back to England, very determined to get into the film industry. And I just started to shoot things. I had a 5D. I joined sort of evening film schools and met young filmmakers who were all just sort of young and kind of desperate like me just to get into it. And I just started to shoot stuff. So I started to shoot short films and got on a bit of a roll with short films. And I kind of realized as long as I could kind of pay my bills, so I had a day job, which was kind of irrelevant. And if I had spent every sort of waking second when I'm not at work shooting, I'm going to learn and I'm going to get better. So that's what I did. So every weekend, evenings, holidays, days off, I would just shoot short films. And I wasn't in any way, what's the word? Pretentious. I'd just shoot anything. I'd shoot a comedy, I'd shoot a horror. Didn't matter if the script was rubbish. I just figured on every single job I would learn something new. And people kept telling me that I should get into the industry by being a camera trainee and working my way up through the department. But I kind of felt that, do you know what? I'm learning to do it my way as a DP already. Like I can say I am a DP. I might be the worst DP in the world, but I'm a DP and I'm learning on everything I do. So there was a 1 year period where I actually shot 50 short films in 1 year. I averaged pretty much one a week. and that was just for me the complete sort of, testing ground. I could just try stuff. I could get stuff wrong and it didn't matter. I could be bold. I could be cautious. I could just keep on just trying things. And once you've done 50 short films, or actually that was in a year, I'd probably done 70 at that point. Then if somebody comes to you with a feature film, I had whatever that feature was, it was a horror film for me. I'd done enough horror to go, well, I've done this and I could do this with you. And then, so there, that led to a low budget feature, that led to another low budget feature. And honestly, it just kept rolling. And I just kind of realized that I'd kind of figured out something in my own way, whether good or bad, I'd sort of figured out my way to do it. And some people like that, some people didn't, that's fine, which I think is all cinema. And really, I've just kept on blagging it, for want of a better word, until this day. So, after I'd done about 15 feature films, I got my first sort of TV job. I'd been very hesitant to get into TV because I didn't want to just shoot coverage. I wanted to sort of always try and tell bold stories, but I got lucky with some good TV directors. And I've done quite a bit of TV and then come back into film again. And yeah, now I'm still sort of just trying to, to keep doing it, to keep sort of learning on every job and take on new and interesting projects. Yeah. So that's my life story.
I think that's such a relatable story as well. Like our film school program there's classes obviously, but it's based on a doing model. So the students have to shoot a whole bunch of short films in their tenure there, and I think most of the learning happens there. It's not until you make those mistakes that you actually learn. And I saying that you did 50 short films, our students are wrecked after 3 of them. So I can imagine what a hectic year that must have been, but what a baptism by fire.
Well, yeah, exactly. And like I said, every short wasn't a masterpiece by any stretch. After that year of 50, I probably walked away with 5 that I was really proud of, that got into festivals that I could stand behind. But even to this day, I kind of go, that's me. There's one in particular. It's a short film called Joseph's Reel that I'd be happy to share if everyone wants to see it, just out of interest. And that was a real sort of kind of epiphany short film where it was like, I'm a cinematographer and that is me and that's what I love to do. But to get there's a lot of poor work, but that's okay. I think I think you just learn and you try things, and yeah, I don't know. That's how I did it. And like my whole thing is, I think cinematography or filmmaking in general, there are so many ways into it and everyone's story is a little bit different. And the most important thing I think is meeting people and forming groups of friends and talking about things and film schools, obviously, an amazing place to do that. So for me, it's both. It's learning the sort of fundamentals and learning the history of cinema and learning the technical stuff. But just as importantly is just meeting people and learning how to talk to people and work with people. And, I think 50% of my job as a cinematographer is actually not cinematography. The cinematography part of my job is very important, but there's so much sort of organization, management, politics, and just talking that's so important. You get jobs by talking to directors, and you have to share a kind of passion for the project and be able to talk about a project. And that's got nothing to do with cinematography, really. It's actually just person skills, so yeah.
I think that's also you mentioned politics, and I think that's also something that very prevalent in film school and something people don't understand. And often that's just because you haven't learned how to communicate a creative vision yet.
Yeah.
So can I ask you a little bit about that? Do you have any advice about how you take something that's so visually in your mind and you completely can imagine it, but now you need to transfer it to a camera crew, or you need to communicate that to a director or even a production designer? Do you have any tips for that process?
Well, yeah, I think it's about trying to, I think it's about not getting lost in your own world. I think you always have to stay, like I come at a film now as a collaborator. So when I join a film, I've read the script, and that script has existed for probably a year or two before I've read the thing. So I'm playing catch up. what is this project? You know, what is this story? And I'm reading it for the first time like the audience, and I'm experiencing it kind of like the audience. And I start to kind of figure things out in my mind, but they're only really first thoughts. The thing that's most important is I understand what the director and the producers think this is, because I might read something and go, oh, it's funny, you know, it's a black comedy, and they might go, no, it's not. You know, like there's so many ways to interpret something. And I think I go into kind of interviews, I go into sort of first meetings now very open. It's like, what do you think this is? What do you want this to be? What could this be? And that's, you know, I think you have to be honest in how you've interpreted something yourself, but I think you have to, as a cinematographer, I think you have to be open to being wrong and to them saying, we want this to be this. And it's like, oh, okay, I didn't see it like that, but let me recalibrate and let's talk about it and let's figure out how I can help you do that or not, because maybe this isn't a good fit. And I think that a really important thing, I mean, there's a big sort of emphasis, you know, filmmaking's hard and difficult and competitive. And there's a real kind of anxiety. Everyone has it, that I want to work, I want to get a job. There's a script, I want to get it. But also, you know, I'm here in Canada right now. I live in the UK, but I'm in Canada for a year with my family. And so if I'm going to bring my family to Canada for a whole year, I've got to make sure I actually want to do this thing. So I often think the interview process is two-way. You know, if you sort of can take the pressure off yourself and it be less kind of desperate, I'm just here to please, I want this job, and a bit more, do we get on? Do we like the same films? Did you see Dune? What did you think of it? And just open those conversations. And if you sort of feel like you're kind of hitting a lot of the same references and, oh, that sounds good and that sounds good, then it's less of an interview. It's a bit more like a first date. I actually think about like an interview for a film, because you're kind of feeling each other out and seeing if you're going to get on and seeing if there's good chemistry. And that's very much a two-way process, or even more if there are producers. So so that's my whole thing, is I just try to sort of talk open and honestly and listen a lot and ask a lot of questions and hear what they have to say. And then if that starts to inspire things, and if my mind goes down different tunnels, we can talk about that. And it's the same for production designers, same for costume. You know, once I'm on a job, once I think I know what the job is, I have to sort of have those same conversations again with, for example, a costume designer, and see if we're making the same film, you know, because sometimes they're seeing things as more heightened, more exaggerated, more colorful, and I'm pulling back a little bit. And you have to just have those conversations and try to see the film from their perspective, because they've got their own way in. They're a costume designer or they're a production designer, and they're seeing this thing through their way of interpreting a script, interpreting a film. And I think you've got to just try to have a lot of sort of empathy and understanding, so that you can, because I think, again, it's a hard job and people are under pressure and it's stressful, and you've just got to sort of realize that, and realize that we're all actually just humans trying to make a thing, you know, and that's difficult and it's stressful. So I try to not get too sort of I don't expect perfection, and I don't think I can give perfection myself. So you've just got to kind of feel out with everybody as a whole, as a collaborative whole, what is this thing and how can we make it the best thing it can possibly be? Yeah.
Evan, you bring up an interesting question, and I think it's really important that I ask you, but what did you think of Dune?
Of what, sorry? Of Dune?
Of Dune, yeah.
Two things to say.
Spoilers. Let's not give away spoilers.
No spoilers.
No spoilers, please.
No spoilers. Well, first thing I should say is I saw it at home, and I think that is important, because I think like I didn't get the full Dune experience. I'm going to go next week, but I've got HBO Max here. It was there to watch. I couldn't resist pressing play. So yeah, what did I think of Dune? I loved it. I mean, Denis, one of my favorite directors. I think what he did with Blade Runner was miraculous. I thought Blade Runner was impossibly good. I think like to do a sequel to Blade Runner and it be as good as it was is just absurd. I just thought that was just like ridiculously good. So my expectations going into Dune were so high that I would give it a 5-star. Like, I loved it, but I was ever so slightly disappointed. And I think that is only because it's a part 1 movie. And I think it is very much a part 1 movie. And I thought the end, no spoilers, I promise, but I thought the ending was particularly underwhelming. I thought, like in the Lord of the Rings films, they managed to make each film have its own arc and end really strongly, and yet be part of a whole. And I felt like in Dune, it just sort of stopped. And that really sort of surprised me. Like that, just at a very final moment, I was like, oh God, this really is part one. Yeah. So where's part two? And I wanted to watch part two straight away. So this is all to say, it's a 5-star movie and I loved it. And I'm sure everyone will love it, but it's not perfect. And I was expecting perfection. And I actually, I'd put Blade Runner, probably a rival above it in Denis' catalogue, but he's a master. So, you know, who cares what I think is also the thing to say. Did you like it?
Enemy is one of my favorite movies, but I do agree with you.
Love it.
This is Dune had the Matrix Revolutions ending. You know, you stop in the middle and I got to sit back and wait. But it really does feel like Greg Fraser is coming into, is just hitting the stratosphere with his work, and I'm very excited to see what he's going to do with Batman, because that's even more exciting. Yeah. But the wonderful thing about
sorry, no, go on.
No, well, the wonderful thing about now I can't remember about Dune. I think the groundwork is laid now, so I think you can have a lot more fun in the second one. There's a lot.
Me too.
So
I totally agree. I think it's just a shame they haven't made the second one yet, because it's not even greenlit. You know, I think it'll get greenlit today, but it's not greenlit yet. So by the time they go over there, make it, post it, and it gets released, we're talking 2-3 years. I think that's a long time off of the ending that they left us with. So I just think it's a real shame they didn't go and make 2-3 films all at once, a bit more like the Lord of the Rings did. But hey, it's amazing. I mean, like, the scene, no spoilers, but the scene is in the book with the hand in the bottom. I mean, it's just masterful suspense, performance, shot making, lighting. And what I was going to say a minute ago is I really think Greg is who I want to be when I grow up. Greg Fraser is absolutely doing it. I think like he's in my opinion, the best working DP right now. He is unbelievable.
Makes two of us, because you know, just when you think you've seen, you know, his best work, he comes out with the next thing and it's equally as.
I mean, that Batman trailer. Yeah, that Batman trailer is just absurd. I mean, it's just it's crazy. And he's a lovely guy as well. He's really great. A lot of my crew, like Batman was made in the UK, and I was doing a job at Warner Studios whilst they were making the Batman. So a lot of my crew were actually going across to Batman, and I was like, yeah, I would go too. So I did get to go on the set, and I met Greg a couple of times, and he's as nice as can be. And every like, he's one of those DPs where all of his philosophies are so spot on, you know. It's not just the technical, it's not just the how, it's the why, it's the what and the why. He's very good at thinking like a director in terms of what is the shot and why are we doing it, not just let's make it arbitrarily pretty, you know. And I think I love those conversations.
Speaking about thinking like a director and things like that, when you work with a director, I mean, those experiences are always very different depending on person to person. But for you, what do you need from a director to get you going, and what do you wish they would give you that you often don't get? We've got a few student directors in the audience here, so maybe this is some advice for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly I think as a cinematographer, you have to have the humility to know you're not in charge, and you are down the ladder. It is not your film, you know, like you don't own it 100%. So you have to have the humility to say, this is what I think, but if you, the director, disagree, then actually you're right, because you're the director, and that's just non-negotiable. You can't really work thinking you're wrong all the time and I'm right. That just doesn't work, because ultimately a film is someone's handwriting. It's a personal thing. There is no objective good and bad. It's all subjective. So I think a director has their handwriting, and as cinematographer, I'm trying to give them a nice pen and guide them. You know, I'm trying to make their handwriting the best version of their handwriting it can be. But if I don't like their handwriting, I shouldn't be their cinematographer. So I think it's all about understanding who they are, what they want to do, and really getting into what's the best version of their movie, and how can I add value to that? How can I take that and give them more than they imagined? So I think it's all about communication. It's all about that sort of chemistry, which is really hard to get. And I think the one thing I don't like personally is a director who is so specific in the cinematography side of things that they don't allow a DP to add value. And what I mean by that is occasionally you get directors, and I think it usually comes from a place of trying to prove themselves, or trying to just do too much, where they're saying, okay, I want 40 mil here and I want it to do exactly this. And to me, that's getting too into the technical. What is much more helpful, what is much more collaborative, what is much more, much more synergy from, is if that same director is saying, I want I don't really want a long lens, I don't really want a wide lens, and I want the feeling of getting closer. Like, who cares what the lens number is, and like those specifics are technical. And it should be much more about feeling. It should be much more about, okay, what's happening here? Why are we pushing in? On what line are we pushing in? Do we want the camera to feel physically close or far away and tight? And, it should be much more about a feeling. And I feel like you don't really, as a director, need to know anything technically, in my opinion. I think it's much more useful to just understand the scene, understand the actors, and have a feeling for how you want it to feel, whether that be with the lighting, whether be with the camera, and just to be able to talk about that feeling. Like, I've worked with actors who have become directors, and they're quite often really interesting directors because they know emotionally what's happening to the characters so well, and they know how they want a scene to feel, but they're not specific with, I want exactly this technical piece of kit. They're much more open to how do I best create this atmosphere that I want to create, and then you can kind of get into the collaboration of that. So yeah, that's the only. I think you have to be David Fincher to be that technically specific. You have to be perfect. And fair enough. If I worked with Fincher, fair enough. I'm not going to say Fincher. Yeah. I think it's exactly because Stanley Kubrick's the same. There are those directors who are sort of freaks, who are so good, so in control, so technical that's kind of their thing. So then at that point, as a cinematographer, again, I take an even further step back, and I'm just trying to give them exactly what they want. But I think usually with a film, you want a director who's going to hire HODs who inspire them and who can give them what they want, and hopefully a little bit more. So, like, to talk about Night Teeth, like Adam, my friend Adam, he's a very good director. He's very visual. He's very, he understands visual shot making. He always wants to push limits. He wants things to be bigger, bolder. So I've got to be really sharp. I've got to know the characters, the scripts, the locations inside out, so that I can just give Adam that little bit more. He's going to come up with a great shot. He's going to have a great idea. So what can I do to add value? And so I've really got to sort of be on my game. On a sort of more human drama, it's all about performances, then it's about, okay, how do I make this look good and correct without getting in the way? How do I let the performances be great? And quite often as a cinematographer, you're just judged on how something looks, but I actually think it's more important that the overall is good, that if there's a drama, if you've got an actor who's ready to cry, that you're not going to take 10 more minutes to have the perfect piece of light just catching their eyebrow, that, oh my God, let's just turn over, she's going to cry and it's going to be amazing. And if you capture that performance, that's as special as any beautiful lighting as well. So, again, it's just all about feeling what's the most important thing in the moment, because sometimes an actor is going to cry and you just want to turn over, and other times it's a moonlit forest and I need a bit of time to light it, and they're very different things. And it's just having the humility, I think, to know when to step back. And most of that comes from the director. It's talking it through. It's just saying, okay, this one is really technical. It's going to take me 2 hours to light it and, to give you what you want. This one is all about performance, if you say so. And I'm just going to give you, I'm going to cross shoot it. I'm going to make it so that you've got two performances at the same time, because that's what you need. So it's all about communication and chemistry, I think. Yeah.
I once got to talk to Stephen, who was Fincher's colorist on Seven, and he says Fincher is so technically orientated that he's even particular about the IRE readings of the practicals in the shot. So he'll like go, no,
Yeah.
that practical is not the same as that one. It needs to be fixed. Things like that. So that's
Wow.
wild
Yeah.
to me. But speaking
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
use of practicals and very
Mhm.
creative use of lighting and especially color, 90s is an absolute feast in that regard. Very saturated moments, very interesting use of practicals. Could you tell me a little bit where that comes from, what your approach was, even a little bit of, for example, like lighting inside a car, the challenges there. Those things are all very difficult, and I think you did a wonderful job.
Thank you. Well, yeah, that comes from low budget. Because I came through the short film route, you know, quite often, particularly at the beginning, I was just an all-in-one DP gaffer grip. So it was all me. So, you know, we'd be in a room, a white box like this, and I'd learn to go, okay, what are my sources? I can't rig a whole ceiling rig. I can't have sky panels in the perfect position. So what can I do? So I learned to embrace practical, you know, sources. And I mean, I also just stylistically like motivated light. I like there to be, I like to see a light source. I like if someone's writing in a dark room, I like just one lamp, as you would. If you're in a library at night and you're the only person there and you're writing, you can instantly just, to me, imagine that in my mind, that there's just a reading light that's on. And that's a beautiful image. And I think the world gives you so many beautiful images naturally without any need for interference. So it's just, I think it's tuning into, it's seeing something in the real world and just sort of remembering it and going, wow, that's really pretty and it's real. So I just need to emulate that. And I think with lighting in particular, as you go up the budget, there's more and more pressure to light things. Producers want to see all these lights that are on the truck being used. But for me, it's much more sort of interesting and bold to have the bravery to say I don't need them today. You know, sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm lighting a night forest, moonlight, whatever. We need the whole thing. But other times it's like, do you know what? The bedside light is perfect. We just need to shape it a bit. Maybe we need to dim it a bit. Maybe we need to color it. But it's perfect. It's in the right spot. It's going to be close to the actor. And we can see it in shot so that it doesn't feel fake. So I've always sort of worked backwards from reality. I've always needed motivation to sort of inspire what my lighting is going to be. So in Night Teeth, you know, because it's a sort of ridiculous film, because it's vampires, it does enable fantasy. It does enable you to kind of go wild. So what the conversations for Night Teeth were about, let's sort of create a hyper stylized LA. Let's make it our LA. Let's make it LA, but let's give it a little bit more. There's a little bit more neon, a little bit more saturated color, like you say. And let's very much like visually bookmark our locations. You know, they go to sort of 5 major locations, and let's make each one have a feel. So this is the kind of purple location. This is the kind of green location. So then it became, instead of arbitrarily just, you know, for example, Venice, towards the end of the film, we knew that we wanted that to be green, you know, as simple as that. That was always going to become the green location. And so at one point we were talking about, do we just change all of the street lights to green? Should we just never explain it? They're green. So you can see in shot that you've got street lights and they're giving off green light. And it's like, well, I guess in Venice there's green street lights. And we decided instead of that to put up a massive billboard and to put green lighting all around this billboard. And as soon as you see that, because genuinely in real life, we did that and we put it up and it gave everything, it just washed everything in green light. And everyone, you know, it's one of those locations where people were taking photos of stuff because it just looked weird because you're not used to seeing this kind of green wash and everything. But what that did is it gave us this sort of stylized, bold motivation and visual bookmarking for the location, but it also made it feel real because you can see it. It's a green billboard and there it is in shot. And it washes everything. And so that was the thing for me. It was how can we kind of find interesting ways to motivate practical lighting so that we can always see the source. Another one is in the VIP room in the club, we did a rear projection ceiling. We knew we wanted to kind of go bonkers on that scene. We needed a reason for Benny to walk into that room and be mesmerized by something, so he's not really listening to what's happening. And so I work a lot with sort of LED screens and virtual productions like Greg does. And the initial idea was, let's do a 40-foot by 20-foot LED ceiling that's put down. That was basically, long story short, that was too heavy. So we went back to rear projection. We had 2 projectors, 2 20 by 20 screens, pulled them as tight as possible, and made it look like a kind of animated ceiling. So again,
I would never have said that that was rear projection, because the colors and things are so saturated. It looked awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, that was one, it took a lot of, once we had that big idea, it was, okay, how do we pull this off? So there was a lot of difficult things involved, not least, how do you pull a screen that's 20 foot by 20 foot tight enough that it's not sagging? Difficult. Art department, and my grips in America were amazing with that. And then it was about, how much brightness am I going to get on a rear projection? Can I get away with no lighting at all in the room? Can it just be that top light? And we had like an LED strip light. And we did. And it was just about testing. It was about producers understanding the idea and backing us, because we had to get a projector flown in from somewhere else that was bright enough and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, what you see, that was a good one in terms of, there was no VFX, there was no helping of that. It was, as I shot it on the monitors is how it looks in the film. So that was a very satisfying one. Yeah.
Especially that low angle shot at the end of the scene. I mean, like that looks like it's got VFX all over it. It's very cool to know that was all practical. So that's actually quite cool.
The VFX in Night Teeth is minimal, actually. It's more annoying stuff. It's actually a lot more like, we shot half of it after, during COVID. So it would be like painting out background with masks and stuff like that. A lot of kind of, a lot of the VFX were kind of annoying, pointless VFX. They weren't like adding value. They were just sort of fixing a little problem that we couldn't control. Or shooting in LA, you get a lot of people just watching on the side of the road. Or if you close a road, quite often there's a police car at the end of the road. So just painting that kind of stuff out. So yeah, it was. We did a lot of it in camera. Is basically what I'm saying. Yeah.
And that's actually an interesting question to ask, is your relationship with VFX as the budgets become bigger and bigger. It seems that more productions become more dependent on VFX or enjoy to use them. Also for things just like, gunplays, smaller things, but also big things up to characters. What is your approach to working with VFX and things that you can't see yet but need to see later, lighting for them, those sorts of things?
Yeah, so VFX has become a huge part of the look of something. Look at Dune. I mean, I think Dune is a great example of so many of those epic wide shots. In fact, so many of the best shots in it, I would argue, are almost entirely VFX. So as a cinematographer, I think more and more we have to sort of fight to have input and have control over that, because it's easy to say, oh, people know that's VFX, people know that's cinematography, but I always think VFX should be working outwards from the cinematography. I am the cinematographer, me and the director are deciding what this is going to look like, and part of that is the VFX. So you've just got to have really clear communication with VFX. You have to say, these are our philosophies, these are our colors, this is how I'm lighting it, these are our lenses, and we need your work to exist inside all of those parameters and be seamless. No one wants it to look like VFX. So then it just becomes about those kind of clear and open conversations. Okay, this shot in this sequence is pure VFX. So as a DP, this is probably the lens I would have used. This is probably how I would have lit it. So let's see that. The difficult thing, I mean, during production, that's all easy in a way. It's just conversations and being in control. The hard thing is when I wrap the shoot. I stop getting paid basically the day we wrap. The director then carries on for 6 more months editing and VFX all along the way. So are putting work out. So for me at the moment, I have to sort of donate my time to say, I still want to be involved in VFX. I'm not going to charge you. I just want this to be good. So I need to be on all those VFX reviews. I need to see them. And it's amazing if you don't do that, how quickly things can kind of veer off, because Again, a lot of directors aren't very technical. Producers are definitely not technical. And it's very easy for VFX to get it wrong and not remember the thing that I said about the lenses or the lighting or whatever, and do something where it's like, well, I'm the person quite often who says, whoa, that's wrong. And it's wrong because of this. And then often it's the director or the producer who go, oh yeah, oh, I see what you mean. And they just hadn't considered it from a cinematography perspective. So that, as I move up the budgets, you know, if I ever did something like a Bond or a Dune or whatever, which is what I want to do eventually, I would really be pushing to stay involved on the project through post, because I think that's so important now. It's, if I just turn up 9 months later to do the color, to do the grading, the DI, and suddenly I've got 50 VFX shots that I think are terrible, I'm in trouble. You know, I've let this get out away from me, and that's not a good thing. And I think for the benefit of everyone, the cinematographer's eyes should be on VFX. So this is very much like an influx thing. It's not, the reality of the industry right now isn't perfect for VFX and cinematography because of that disparity in post, but it's definitely something I'm pushing for more and more. And because I tend to have good relationships with directors, there's a couple of things I'm in post on at the moment. The director will just text me a quick video of a shot and say, like, this looks funky to me, what's going on? And I can say, oh, it's because, you know, the person is in focus and the thing 50 feet behind them is also in focus. So I think they need to knock that out of focus. And it's just those little obvious things, but they're not obvious to some people because they're not thinking about lenses and stuff. So so yeah, VFX is on my mind a lot at the moment. Just trying to sort of, and the other thing to say is you get a lot of bad VFX. You really do. VFX is everywhere now, and there's not enough people, and a lot of stuff gets shipped off to you know, India and wherever to save money, and you end up with an artist who is 5 steps removed, who, you know, the director has said, I want this, and the producer said, we want this, and the VFX supervisor has said, we want this, and that person's boss has told that person they want this. And so it's not their fault, it's just they're so removed from the process. They send something back that's completely wrong, but it's cheap. And at that point, the producers and the director have a choice. It's like, are we going to do it again? Are we going to take this away from them and spend more money? Or are we just going to accept a bad shot? And so a lot of the time as a DP, I come back in and I'm like, what's up with all these really bad shots? And they're like, yeah, we know, but you know, money and time, and it's difficult. It's a really difficult thing.
I see that becoming more and more common, where cinematographers are staying on, especially if you care about a project, you stay on free of charge. And that's something I recently tried to put a lecture together on that needs a little bit of work, but it's protecting your image during the workflow. I mean, you shoot it, but how are you going to protect what you made through digital intermediate, through VFX, and then you know, at the end when it comes to delivery, even for cinema, it's going to HDR or any different color space is going to cinema. The image is constantly shifting in those deliverables as well, which is a massive challenge. And I think you know, people in post get so sick of it that, you know, they just want to get it out and they don't protect your image. But that's something I still definitely need to think a lot about. But it's very interesting to get insights from other people, because I think students, especially going out now, that's something they're going to have to deal with quite a bit, is what happens to your files afterwards. But speaking about what's
definitely
No,
well, all I was going to say on that is I think I don't know how many people here want to be cinematographers, but if that is your thing, I think you really need to educate yourself in VFX. That's definitely something I realized that if I don't get on top of VFX, if I can't basically be an expert in VFX, I'm not going to be able to say to VFX people, no, I don't want it like that, or this is why it's wrong. Or and so you really do have to protect yourself. You have to become as good at VFX as VFX people, so that you can disagree with them and say, no, you're wrong. I want it like this because I know this is better. And you have to really know your stuff, you know, to be able to be that confident and say that. And a lot of my thing at the moment is about, should this be VFX or not? Let's not just be lazy and say, well, it's VFX, because is it VFX? Let's think about that. You know, what if we used rear projection through a window? What if we take away the blue screen? What if we just do it in camera? It's going to be massively out of focus. Rather than just kicking it down the road. Let's get a nice plate of London and let's put it on a rear projection screen or an LED screen out of a window, and I can have rain on the window, and I can do all these things to make it feel real and have it out of focus, and it's going to look great in camera, and you're not going to need any VFX at all. And you just need to know that is better. Quite often you're sort of putting your name on the line as a cinematographer, because you're saying to producers, no, you're wrong, it shouldn't be that, let's do it this way, I promise you it's going to look better. So you do need to know it's going to look better. So that only comes from experimentation and research and just sort of thinking outside the box sometimes. So that's a thing I do a lot of, is trying to do things in camera more and more. I did a sci-fi series called The Feed for Amazon, and on that we had a lot of views of future London through a window, but I didn't want to be restricted. I hate blue screen. I absolutely hate blue screen. I like, you know, if you're doing sci-fi and you've got big glass windows, I don't want blue and green light coming into the set, because the cleanup process is never as good as I want it to be. And so on that, we were working with VFX to shoot plates of London, then do the VFX extensions of buildings and flying cars and whatever else in prep, deliver those plates to us, put them on the screen, and then shoot the scene with a rear projection with delivered VFX already on it. So that saved production tons of money, because rather than shot by shot by shot, they just delivered the plate once, they had it on the screen, and then we just did it all in camera, and it worked really well. I think like that's what's really interesting on virtual production, like Greg Fraser did in The Mandalorian, was that ability to sort of do things in camera. You get real reflections. Actors love it because you can see the real thing out of the window. You're not sort of saying, okay, where's the thing I'm looking at? And somebody puts a cross on a green screen. You can actually just see the thing. So yeah, I'm a big fan of doing that. It obviously requires budget. But then again, not always. You know, I did a really low budget film for Netflix called iBoy. And in that, we just took a couple photographs of London, printed them out as rear projection, not rear projection, as a translight, and lit it. And that's how we did all of the sort of studio work, was with a very sort of low budget translight. And quite often those old techniques really do work well. You just sort of have the confidence to do them. So virtual production, it's a bit of a weird one for me. I have shot virtual production, I've used it. And the thing with virtual production is I do believe it's going to be one of the tools that we use all the time in the future. The one thing that I feel like no one's really saying is that I don't think it's ready right now. I think there's a little bit of a false dawn happening right now, because things like The Mandalorian, with Disney money behind them, they can afford to buy this, you know, to use this incredibly expensive technology and studio space. And they can also afford to fix the problems. And there are a lot of problems. Right now, virtual production has about a half-second lag, 6 frames to 12 frames of lag. So what that means is if I'm handheld and if I'm moving constantly, the screen falls out of sync by about half a second or 6 frames. That's something no one is saying. I'm saying it, but because it's true. And because when I was doing virtual production, it suddenly was like, oh God, so we can't do handhelds. It just doesn't work. And you can't change direction. If you're panning left to right or tracking left to right, and then you change direction, the screen is going to lag by half a second behind. And that's a pretty major problem, you know. Mandalorian and you know everything else that's using it, the Batman, you know, Greg is a master of that, and he knows how to hide those problems, but those problems exist. And until, you know, the processors, the GPUs, the graphics get 3-5 years more advanced, that's going to remain an issue. There's a lot of other issues in terms of, I mean, you know, like anything, it's always a conversation about what's best for this scene, what's best for this project. And I think you have tons of options. Do we go to the desert and shoot it for real? Do we hire an expensive virtual production studio and do it in virtual? Do we do it on LED screens, not virtual? Do we actually need the tracking? Do we need the parallax or not? Or do we old-fashioned build a massive stage and have like a painted backdrop? Or what, you know, there's so many ways you can do things. And virtual gives you an incredibly exciting in-camera option. And control is a huge part of it. I mean, I think where virtual will really become a sort of standard is if there's a scene, okay, this scene takes place at magic hour and it's 6 pages long. So you know, if you're Dune, if you're a big film, you have the choice there. Do we go to the desert and do we shoot mornings and like, do we do Terrence Malick? You know, do we shoot half an hour a day, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, and that's a day? And do we do that for 3 weeks to capture a scene? Or do we make the investment and do virtual production and probably shoot it in 2 days, where we can put the sun where we want it and control everything? And yeah, there's no easy right or wrong. It's just about resources and knowing the benefits and the negatives. And you know, Mandalorian was the absolute perfect project for virtual production because he's a walking mirror. So, you know, blue screen, green screen, you know, you're just going to see problems reflected off of his suit all the time. And also a lot of it's in the desert. So a lot of the time, the parallax factor is actually minimal because you're just dealing with deep background, midground, and foreground. You know, a lot of the time it's just a big sky, magic hour feeling, and some sand. So that's perfect for virtual production. If you're in a forest at night and you're lateral tracking through a forest, for example, it's much more difficult. That's really difficult to make that look good. You have all the benefits, you have all the negatives of the lag. And you also have, you know, just blocking a scene in virtual production is so different. It doesn't really work in the same way. You can't go into a room and say, okay, actors, what are we going to do? You want to be near the window. It doesn't really work like that. You've got to be a lot more restrictive. You've got to, because the screen itself is still relatively low quality, so you can't see it clearly. So you definitely can't pull focus to it. And so you need actors away from it so that it can stay out of focus. As soon as it starts to come into focus, it doesn't look very good. You get moire, all kinds of problems. So you sort of got to, it works best when people are relatively still. It works best when you can kind of center people in the middle of the stage and have the screen far away from them. But at that point, you have to question why you're using it. That's the complicated thing here, is if you're not using parallax, if you're not using the tracking, why are you doing virtual at all? So yeah, it's a very sort of it's a kind of a first world problem. You know, it's an incredibly luxurious and expensive bit of kit that isn't quite perfect yet and is a few years away from being perfect. So I love the idea of doing more and more in camera. You get all the benefits of ambient lighting. I like I said before, I hate blue screen, green screen. I really just think we should be done with blue and green screen. We should use gray or white screen, or do it in camera. You know, that is how you get the best end results. And virtual gives us another sort of, you know, tool in the toolbox if used correctly and at the right time. If that makes sense.
That's super cool. That's super cool advice, because if you look at any marketing material, anything like that, everybody's very positive about shooting on the volume and things like that. But I have spoken to a few guys, and they're always surprised about the limitations that they hit. And I think you summed them up perfectly. It's definitely a very exciting technology, and I think it's going to get much better, much quicker. Because I remember originally when we were doing car ads, you would use them to create reflections on the cars, but you would never shoot into them. And you know, a few years later, now we're shooting into them, and I can only imagine what's going to be next. But also, so you wanted to say?
Well, no, all I was going to say, sorry to interrupt. All I was going to say is Night Teeth. Every single scene inside the car in Night Teeth is on a stage. And we did that with LED screens. And that was very much discussed. And that, for me, was an example of where LED screens with great content on them in the right position and using them for ambient lighting can look great in camera. And to do that, you don't need virtual. You know, at what point does something cross into the territory where it has to be virtual? Because all virtual really is when the camera is moving, the content is giving you 3D parallax. And in a car, I would argue you never need that, because you know, a car, you're so limited in shots anyway, you're not going to be able to move enough to be able to feel the parallax outside of the window anyway. So again, it's a case of the right tool for the right job. And I think we realized that, because virtual was sort of available to us as an option for Night Teeth, and we just decided, shooting in a car, there's not going to be enough parallax to need the virtual. So let's approach it like a virtual set, but use 2D. You just use flat, plates in a kind of slightly more old-fashioned way. So that's the key thing, I think, is just knowing at what point does it step into the territory where virtual is beneficial, and does that benefit outweigh the negatives as discussed. And I think the reason everyone's so positive at the moment about virtual, rightfully so, is because they want investment in it. They want people to be excited about it. They need it to grow, so they want people to keep using it. You know, the Disneys of the world, go ahead, because they can afford to fix the problems, and that we need Disney and people like that to keep using them, to bankroll them for everyone else, because, you know, the more they advance, the more people use them, they're going to get better and better, and then the technology is going to filter down to smaller and smaller jobs, and hopefully then we can all use them all the time. So you know, I think there's a logic behind it. It's just knowing that there are negatives so that you're not left looking a bit silly on set, you know, explaining why to Meryl Streep she's not allowed to take 3 steps towards the screen. Do you know what I mean? It's those kind of conversations you need to know ahead of time that there are limitations. Yeah.
So speaking about telling Meryl Streep what she can and can't do, can we talk the performances in 90s quite claustrophobic in certain scenes and things like that? And I mean, I would assume that you and maybe the camera op are right there in the middle of that action. Can you talk about not just 90s, but all your productions, working with actors, standing behind the camera, maybe how to get them comfortable, and then also how to communicate technical particulars like you just mentioned?
Yeah, it's a really important part of the job, because quite often you are the first you're the first person there for them, beyond the director. Quite often you kind of develop a sort of secret relationship with actors, because as a DP, as a cinematographer, you need to know that really the actor's performance is none of your business, actually. You know, it's not really in anywhere in my job description to say to a director or an actor, oh, I think that was a bit big, you know, that's not my job. Fair enough, I may think that. Fair enough, if I've got an amazing relationship with the director, I might be able to, you know, insinuate something just to sort of edge it, you know, but really you're playing with fire there. It's not really your area of concern. What you can do is give them an environment to get the best out of them, to make them feel comfortable. You know, standing on a set, lights, cameras, blah, blah, blah. Even for experienced actors, they get nervous. You know, you really see it. And as a DP, I think, particularly if you're operating camera, you can really get to know the actors and get to know, oh, they don't like that. They don't want to stand on the mark for 5 minutes whilst I light them. They want to come in at the last second because they're nervous. So let's reassure them. Let's get a good stand in. Let's just make them feel looked after, so that we get the best out of them. And like I was saying earlier about crying or something like that, quite often, if I'm operating, I know that better than anyone. Like I get to know them, I get to know their performance, and I feel like, do you know what, they're losing a bit of their impetus, a bit of their emotion, because of how long resets are taking. So I might say to the first AD or to the director, I think we should do 2 on the roll. I think we should just shoot 1 and then shoot another. Let's not even cut in between. No resets. No one comes in. Let's just do 2 in a row. And quite often I'm the person to say that, because I realize it's happening. So yeah, it's about being open and humble and realizing that there are more important factors in play quite often than yourself. I think Deakins, when he did Shawshank Redemption, there's a scene with 2 of them having a chat, and he was going to do this elaborate lighting thing. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he saw the rehearsal, and the rehearsal was so electric and the actors were so good. He just said, forget all of that. We're going to cross shoot and we're going to turn over in 5 minutes, because we just need to capture it. It's lightning in a bottle. And I think that you just need to have like your eyes wide open to what's happening in the whole, in the main, and what's the most important thing. And sometimes that's capturing a performance and creating an environment. And other times it's something very, very technical with very limited, you know, the performance isn't necessarily as important. And so communicating with the actor very clearly what you need from them and why, and how this is going to best service the story. So much of it is about communication. And I must say, I've since I've started working in America, I'm not allowed to operate anymore. This is like a weird union thing. Once you join the American Union, you know, if I want to operate, I basically have to write a letter to the union, and you almost have to have an interview to explain why you must operate. And Sean Bobbitt and Roger Deakins and even Greg Fraser, they do that some of the time.
So in the UK, is that not a thing? Is that just a
no? I can operate in the UK, definitely. I can definitely operate in the UK, and actually, because the UK is quite cheap, stereotypically, they want me to operate because it saves them an operator fee. So what we've started doing in the UK now is charging a fee to operate as a DP. We've started saying it should not be there as a cost saving thing. If you know it's like me operating shouldn't save the producer's money, basically, because you are taking a job away from someone else and you are taking away an efficiency. If I'm operating, because here's the sort of struggle, is to operate is to be close to the actors and intimate and understand exactly what's happening with performance. But it is also to get caught up in that. And it is also, you get caught up in setting marks and you get caught up in performance. And it's very easy to get seduced by that. It's a very sort of thrilling process to be at 2 feet away from an amazing actor and they're crying. You really feel a participant. You're dancing with them, essentially, and there's a real adrenaline and thrill to that. You get a real high from it. It's amazing. But that seductive thing isn't always good, you know. Like sometimes you do need to step back and look at the lighting or look at the operating and go, do you know what, it's not right. You know, and be a bit of a spoiler in that way. So I'm at the moment myself figuring out where I actually want to be. And I think I loved operating and I loved some of the relationships I forged with actors and all those intimate moments, but I actually prefer to be in the monitor, because then it's me and the director and we're just looking at it and going quite coldly sometimes, it's not good enough and this is why. And I think you can get caught up in the moment operating, but this is me and I'm figuring it out myself. And I think some people like Deakins operate forever, and you know, he's pretty good. So who am I to say what's right or wrong? It just depends on the person, depends on the project. If I did a really intimate low budget movie, small crew, and maybe the lead actor's like a 10-year-old kid, instantly to me, I'm operating then, because I need to be there, and because his performance, her performance is crucial to this. That feels different. If I'm doing something like Avenue 5 or The Last of Us, where I've got 3 or 4 cameras at all times and massive lighting rigs and producers who are watching every shot, I just need to be in the tent. I need to be there for those conversations and not get caught up in is whoever hitting their mark, you know? So it just depends.
Evan, let me open up the floor to the students. Guys,
please.
Now's your chance. Who's got a question? Llewellyn, your turn.
Good day, Evan.
Hey.
So my question is, looking back in retrospective to the time when you were creating all those 50 to 100 short films, what would you say is the biggest misconception? Like if you're looking at your young hopeful self, thinking and looking at the role of a DP, what would you say, what did you expect you were going to do versus the reality, what you're doing now? What would you say that is?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I was very ambitious really early on, like stupidly so. You know, I always thought I want to shoot a big budget film one day, and that's always been there. So I've always had that thing in my mind I want to get to, and I've still got. So I always was really, really ambitious. I knew I didn't want to settle for working on crap. You know, I didn't want to do some really just whatever TV, and just, I just thought if I'm not like passionate, if I'm not excited and thrilled by what I'm doing, I shouldn't do this, because it's too hard. You know, you have to give your all to filmmaking. It's not a part-time thing. It's all encompassing. So I have to love it. I have to feel passionate about it. And that's a kind of self-fulfilling thing, because if you do make those sacrifices, if you are passionate about it, you will succeed. You know, like there are opportunities out there. And if you come to an interview and you're passionate about it and you've done your homework and all of these things, that all comes through, and you've got a better chance of getting the job. But I think, the biggest misconception I think would be at the beginning, I was so focused on the art of cinematography, and maybe that was the right thing to do, but the reality of cinematography is different. In, like I said, you know, if I'm doing I haven't done a Disney film, but let's say a Disney movie, that's such a commercial thing to do. There are so many responsibilities there. You're dealing with the studio who are going to sign off every single shot. You're dealing with massive politics. You've got a crew of maybe 70 people, and you've got to keep that crew happy, and you've got to know how to use that crew. And you know, maybe the crew are complaining about overtime, and you know, all of these. There are so many issues away from the cinematography. Sometimes the cinematography is almost an afterthought, actually, because a project can be such a big sort of management undertaking. It can be so much about organization and budget and people and you know, the industry around it, that the actual work is kind of like just separate to that. And I think if I'd realized that earlier, there's a sort of, maybe I'd have made a few different choices. I mean, I think a really big thing is getting a job is down to you and the director. That's the director's going to say, I want this DP. And you know, they're going to get that DP if that's who they want. But to get in front of that director, the producers kind of have to put you on the table. The producers have to go, here are 7 people to meet, to talk about. So producers, in my opinion, don't really care about cinematography. They're not looking at a film and the minutiae of the lighting and going, that's our guy. They don't work like that. They're looking at IMDb. They're looking at my agent. They're looking at credits. Can this person professionally deliver? Are they going to be difficult? Do they have the experience to know how to do a camera budget, to manage all these things? You know, that there's, and even from a lighting perspective, you know, if I'm going to light a studio wood or whatever it is, that's not something you can wing. You know, you have to have worked your way to that point, and you have to have that experience. So just as a professional, you can just go, yeah, I can do that, no worries. You know, I can light a massive stage and I know how to do that, and I can work with a gaffer to achieve that. And all of that is sort of confidence and reassurance. So those producers know that they're not taking a big gamble on hiring you, that you're just going to be able to deliver a professional product, which is ultimately what they want. So yeah, I think I figured out how important the kind of business management, organization and reputation side of the industry is, a bit later than I could have done. And it's a hard thing to kind of, I mean, like, how do you learn that stuff? You just have to, I think, be aware that you need to learn it. I think you just have to know that the art isn't everything, that this ultimately, when it comes down to it, is a commercial enterprise. You know, budgets and box office and viewing figures are what make and break projects. You know, it's not always, you can do the most beautiful, wonderful, artful cinematography, and if it's on a really terrible movie that no one's ever going to watch, it doesn't matter. You know, that's sort of wasted effort sometimes. Well, I say wasted, nothing's wasted, because you learn from that and take it onto your next project. But I think the reality of the sort of commercial industry is something that is really important to sort of figure out, and to understand if you can play the politics and the games in the industry at large, and then at the same time become a great cinematographer artist. That's the kind of balance. It's kind of keeping both parties happy. It's how to satisfy the industry and the producers and the management and the budget, and also satisfy yourself and the director as an artist, and sort of meld those two worlds together. So that's the thing that's really hard to teach, really hard to learn. I think it's just being aware of that and being open to that, and reading Deadline, reading about the industry, reading about budgets, reading about box office, just so you sort of know your stuff when it comes to those things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've learned a lot from you. Have a nice day. Thanks.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Llewellyn. Mr. Radford, you have a question?
Cool. So I've got a kind of like a technical, or not technical, more practical question about just like your journey is so cool, like the way you've shot so many shorts, and you could have touched on it a little bit earlier, but I was very curious how like practically how you were able to do all those shorts, you know, like did you fund them, and how did you find the people that were keen to do all of these shorts? Because I'm assuming there were a lot of maybe like unpaid type projects. Like how did you fund it? Like, because it's so cool.
Yeah.
Like I would have loved to go, or would love to go this route as well. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, so yeah, so what I did was I was working, I knew that I wanted to be a cinematographer. I had my 5D, I had a little bit of kit, I'd shot a few shorts, but I was like, I need to be in London because that's where there's a buzz, that's where there's people, that's where there's an industry. And to be in London, I need to be able to pay my rent. So I got a job at a locations company, and it was just nothing to do. I mean, it technically was in the industry, but basically I was selling advertising for this locations book for film and TV people. So it was just a job, really. I was in London, I was earning, you know, poor to okay money, but I could get by. The great thing about that job was they were flexible with my hours. So I could take a Monday off and then work double time on a Friday. And I had like 25 days holiday. And they did all the national holidays. And what I decided was that's my day job and that pays the bills. And then I'm going to just work my ass off for 1 year, and I'm going to just really, every weekend, I'm going to shoot something. And every, if there's an evening, if I have to take 4 days holiday to go to Spain to shoot a short film, that's what I'll do. But like you say, how do you find those opportunities? So I was on, at the time, it was Mandy.com, it was Production Base, and it was Film and TV Pro. I don't know how many of those still exist, but they're just websites where kind of free ads where people could just put ads up saying looking for a DP. And I just swamped that site, or those 3 sites. I was like a paid member of all 3 sites, gave myself a nice profile. I'd cut together a reasonably good show reel at the time. And every single looking for a DOP advert, I just went after it. And it didn't, like I said, didn't matter if it was good, didn't matter if it was bad, didn't matter if it was paid, didn't matter if it was whatever. Because I'd taken care of my day job, I was sort of liberated to just shoot. And so that's what I did. I just found all of these contacts, and things tend to snowball. If you've done 3 shorts with 3 different directors, they're going to talk to their film friends, and oh, my friend is now doing a short. So after a point, it became less and less of finding just cold adverts online and being a lot more, my friend wants to do this, or do you remember that production designer on that short film where he's now going to direct his short and he wants me to do it? And it just, the whole network just grows. And out of those like 100 odd shorts I've done, there's probably 10 directors out of those 100, so sort of 1 in 10 who I'm still in contact now, still friends with now. Some of them have become successful professional directors. Some have completely left the industry behind, and we're just friends. And it's just expanded my network, expanded my knowledge. And I made sure that if ever I did earn money, if ever there was a paid DP role on a short film, that I would invest that money back into my career. So buy some new equipment. So after about a year of doing that, I did build up quite a good kit. So I had a lot of lights, I had camera sliders, I had more and more stuff. And that meant that even on the unpaid short films, I'd be able to say, okay, I'm happy to not have a fee, but if you could use my camera and all my stuff, I'll do that for a really good deal for you. So suddenly I'm getting paid anyway, even though it's an unpaid job. I was sort of hiring out my kit. So yeah, that just grows. You get more kit, get more experience, get more people, and it just kind of snowballed. So that year of me doing 50 was probably after I don't know for sure, but probably after 4 years maybe of part-time doing the odd short here and there. And I just sort of built up this momentum and then just sort of went with it. And the second time I did a similar thing was later on, when I had an agent, when I had a career. I was doing more and more commercials. My agent at the time kept getting me commercials, and commercials are quite seductive because they can pay really well and they're short. You can do lots of them. But I found that because I was going down the commercials route, I actually wasn't very happy with that. I found myself like, I personally didn't like commercials. I didn't like the role of the cinematographer in commercials. I didn't like the work I was doing. And even if you make something look great, I kind of was like, do you know what though? It's just a Lipton iced tea commercial. Doesn't matter. and I knew in my heart I wanted to do drama. I wanted to do, storytelling. So at the time, I said to my agent at the time, okay, I'm going to do 1 year of no commercials at all. I want to just commit to drama. I want to be a drama DP. And that's one of the most important things I ever did, because that then sent a message to my agent, sent a message to the industry that I'm a drama DP. I don't do commercials, so don't even bother. Like, I just want good scripts. And as soon as you do that, you're kind of telling people who you are. And suddenly I'm only being sent drama projects. And now when my agent is getting a feature film, I'm on the list of people who are going to get that script, because she's not going to be able to make money from me doing commercials anymore. So she needs me to work on drama. So that was a really important stage in my career, is making that commitment to drama. And I've never looked back, actually, like since that point. I mean, I haven't done a commercial now for maybe 5 years. And for me personally, that's great. I don't think I ever will again. I don't want to do that. That's not who I personally am. I don't get passionate about that. Some people do, and I don't want to, if any of you want to do commercials, I don't want to discredit that at all. But for me personally, I just had to stay true to what I was passionate about, and that was drama. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And
Thanks.
Evan, I just want to thank you for your time so much. This was so great, and it's very, very appreciated. All the best for your future.
Likewise,
No problem at
and
all.
we can't wait to see you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I really appreciate it as well. And, you know, sort of stay in touch. I don't know how that's possible, but, you know, when The Last of Us comes out, I'd be happy to do something like this again, and just keep shooting and, you know, keep doing what you do and be bold. That's my main thing.